Hey friends, so I got a question asking about my theory of happiness and how I think about being happy. And someone recently pointed me to a video that was incredibly well done in terms of like production value and in terms of research, and it just digs into all of the kind of literature about happiness. And so I'm not going to try and compete with that by presenting some kind of a research paper, and I'm just going to talk about my own perspective and my own experience. Happiness. So I think there is the a sort of mainstream understanding of how happiness is almost all inclusive and elusive and just kind of ephemeral, kind of vague, kind of general. Like, there's a lot of different ways to consider, conceive of happiness. And I would say that I don't really think in terms of happiness very much. I think that it's a bit of a moving target, a bit of something that you can't quite reach by reaching out for it. I once wrote a blog post many years ago about how the phrase "the pursuit of happiness" is kind of a losing game in a way. It's kind of set up to fail because of the hedonic treadmill, right? The hedonic treadmill is the idea that as you pursue pleasure and you acquire pleasure, you get used to it, you get acclimatized to it, and so you need more and more pleasure to feel the same amount of happiness. And I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. My broad understanding from like cursory reading of the literature about happiness says that there's a few things that people lump together when they talk about happiness. They talk about pleasure, like pure pleasure, physical pleasure from eating great food, from getting a massage, from having sex, from just things that are intrinsically kind of pleasing physically. Then there is purpose, meaning, right? The idea that you are doing something significant and substantial with your life, something that fulfills your narrative, something that makes you feel purposeful. So you could live a life with very little pleasure and yet derive a lot of satisfaction from doing something that you think is right and good. And then there's like flow, which is a kind of pleasure that you get from doing an activity in a state that allows you to kind of transcend your consciousness. So people experience it while dancing, while playing music at a high level, or just being in the zone. So in sports, in comedy, in making videos, even potentially, and that's a kind of state-based pleasure that comes from a kind of transcendence, right? And for me, I find that I don't really think of myself as trying to hyper optimize for any one of those things. I think there are like multiple kind of meters. You have multiple meters in life, right? Like fuel meters, where if you haven't eaten in a while, you start to get hungry. You notice when you're thirsty. You notice when you're sleepy, right? Each of these things, when they start to deplete past a certain threshold, you become conscious of it, and then you try to do something about it. Like, so if you're hungry and you're sleepy, but you haven't slept in a couple of days, you're probably gonna fall asleep before you find food, right? But if you haven't eaten in weeks, right, then the prospect of food is going to be more tantalizing even if you're slightly sleepy. Something like that. It's more complex, but you get the idea. I find that I'm sure I've mentioned this either in my video about I've kind of circled around the topic of happiness in multiple videos. Check out my video on depression, check out my video on optimism, check out my video on recreating myself. I think very often people think of happiness as something related to self-esteem. Like if you can think highly of yourself, if you like yourself, then you are happy. And if you don't like yourself, then you are not happy. I'm not a fan of self-esteem as a concept. I remember doing a bunch of reading about it long ago when I was like a teenager. And there was this idea of conditional self-esteem, which is if you like yourself because you think you're smart, then you will feel pressured to maintain that narrative that you're smart. And so there are some kind of traps in that path where you start to avoid things that make you feel not smart, which is dangerous, because to get to new levels of smart, you have to work through things that will make you feel not smart. You have to try and do things that are difficult, challenging, unfamiliar. And so you have to find if you want to build your self-image on your intelligence, you will have to have a more complex formulation of what intelligence is. And it's just I would bypass that game entirely. I think what is preferable to self-esteem is self-respect. I think that's a better frame. I'm sure they're related, right? It's all concepts, and you can choose what kind of concepts you want to use in your life to navigate, right? And I think of self-respect as something that is grounded in a belief system that is kind of deeper, kind of more fundamental. So I respect myself for having made progress on my goals. And when I say goals, I'm not too fixated on any one particular goal. I remember being I guess I should think back to when I felt unhappy, right? It's easier to try to solve for unhappiness and be less unhappy than to try to be more happy. I think being more happy is a bunch of it's about gratitude, a bunch of it is about appreciation, and even just sitting down and doing a gratitude exercise where you think about where you are in life, and you think about all the things that you have received from others, or even from yourself, like just to live I live in a country that is safe, that I have access to clean water, I have food, I have I have money in the bank, I have people who love me, I have I don't currently have a job, but if I needed a job, I could get one because I have relationships with people that I have put in the time and effort to build. So once you've done a bunch of work to improve your life situation, it's easier to be happy. I think it's more challenge. And well, that is not universally true, right? So I have met people who are far more accomplished than I am, who have far more assets and resources than I am, who are less happy. Why? I think it boils down to their expectations, and it boils down to their beliefs about what they are supposed to be doing, their beliefs about how their life is supposed to be. So a lot of happiness is about, I'm reminded now of this Zen Pencils comic about, I'm not sure if it's a quote of Buddha himself or like a Buddhist monk or something, where somebody says, "I want happiness." And then the monk responds, first, remove the I, that's ego, that's identity, that's, your fixation on yourself is not helping you. Then remove the want, because that's desire, and fixation on desire is not healthy either. And then all you're left with is happiness. I think there's a truth to that. I think when you transcend yourself, and I think it is possible to reflect on the limitations of the identity and to see that the self, I, my name, Visagan, whatever, the person, right, is very much a kind of construct, an idea. It's an interface, really. Like, why do we have names? We have names so that, we can talk to other people, we can introduce ourselves, people can introduce us, and it's for interfacing with other faces, right? It's for being able to have conversations and being able to get through everyday life. But the self is, it's a good servant and a terrible master, right? Because when you allow yourself to be something that is, it's a servant, it's something that should serve you. You shouldn't be living your life trying to kind of puff up yourself, right? And there is this article and a series of articles by this social media theorist Nathan Jurgensen, I believe that's his name, and he talks about the person profile dialectic. And that sounds complicated, but what it simply means is, when you create your Facebook profile, your Instagram profile, your Twitter profile, whatever it is, that representation simultaneously creates you back. It's like, let's say you go on a holiday and you want to take a nice photo so that of yourself or of a scenery or whatever, so that you can post it on your social media on your social media account, so that you can show other people and yourself, right, that these are places you have been to and you're the kind of person that does that kind of thing. And so, you may find yourself compelled to make a trip to somewhere in a certain location, look for the Instagram worthy locations or whatever, and take those photos to signal those things. And so the profile has now influenced your behavior. Your profile has created you just as you have created your profile. That's not necessarily a bad thing intrinsically, but it's something to be mindful of, because you don't want, because again, if you're completely dominated by your profile in turn is shaped by whatever is the competitive forces that is, that turns social media into a game of whether you want to see it as one-upmanship, self-expression, whatever. You don't really have much of a choice in terms of what that game is like, but you do have a choice in terms of whether or not you're going to play it, or what are the terms on which you're going to play it, right? And so I'm playing the YouTube game, and it would be tempting to try and do whatever it takes to get as many subscribers as possible, as quickly as possible, get as many likes, comments, shares, subscribes, whatever. And those things are nice, but I don't want to modify my fundamental taste and vision and voice to serve that. That would make me unhappy. And I'm reminded now of a video by Michelle Kwan, I think that's her name, like the famous beauty vlogger, one of the OGs, right? One of the first few people to do a beauty vlog on like a makeup and stuff on YouTube. And she made this video about why she left YouTube. And it's this very well told story about her life, about how, when she started doing it, she was doing it out of passion. That was before people were making money on YouTube. And so she wasn't trying to monetize it or anything like that. She was just sharing her love for makeup. And she talks about how her mom was a beautician and her mom made people happy by making them, doing makeup for them and stuff like that. And how it's very worth watching. I'll link it in the description. She talks about how, the opportunity kind of grew and she became successful by certain conventional metrics, right? And she got all this attention, and attention is a kind of currency, right? It's a kind of money in a sense. Like, it's a kind of capital that you can sell for money, or you can sell for other things. You can trade, right? And then, as she got a bigger amount of currency, like, people wanted a slice of that, and then it became, she felt compelled for some reason, because it's like you're doing this thing and the world is reacting in a certain way, rewarding you in a certain way, and it's very tempting to fall into the, I don't want to call it a trap, but like, it is a kind of trap. It is that there's a default setting that is very financial, and you should go and watch the video. I don't think I can do it justice. I think she told a very compelling story about how she got everything that she got, more than she thought she wanted, right? She got more than she dared to believe, and yet she found herself unhappy. It's really like, people who never get to taste that kind of success might think of it as sour grapes, or might think of it as boo-hoo rich person complaining about their wealth or whatever. But I've done a lot of reading on this stuff. I'm fascinated by it, and I do think that when people tell you what they're going through, you should generally believe them as a first cut. And I mean, like, there will be people who are not telling the truth, but you can kind of figure that out. You shouldn't begin with the assumption that everyone is lying to you. And I think she's right. And I think a lot of people who become successful in some conventional sense, they find that what came with it was more than what they were prepared for, and that there were trade-offs that they were not expecting. And like, anything that you do, right? Like, it's always more than you expect. There's always more detail. Reality has a surprising amount of detail. And, so you should not depend on achieving some goal or crossing some milestone, making some amount of money, getting some number of subscribers, whatever, that kind of thing. You shouldn't depend on those things to be happy, to define your worth, in a sense, right? Like, again, worth is the phrase define your worth. I feel like it's a very tricky, and I really don't even like using that word. Like, you shouldn't be thinking about how much am I worth. Like, that's a frame that you lose the game before you even start playing, in a sense, right? It's you should not be trying to define your worth. You should figure out what you're excited about. I think excitement is something that is very great to navigate by. As long as there's something in your life that you're excited about, you can keep living. Even if you're not swimming in pleasure every day, even if you're not in flow, like I was in flow for a couple of weeks, just publishing a video every day, and that felt very good. And then I got tired and I took a break for a day or two, and then now I'm back. But even when I'm not in flow, I still feel good because there are things I'm excited about. I'm excited about continuing to make more videos. I'm excited about writing my ebooks. I'm excited about going through my journals and reaching a sort of new synthesis about all the things that I care about. And having things that you're excited about, I think, is a close enough proxy to happiness. It might not be happiness itself, but it provides you with, it very quickly, I think, aligns you with getting to a place that can make you happy. And I've seen kind of semi-extreme cases where, like, people on Reddit have said things like, I'm depressed and I'm suicidal, but the thing that keeps me going is that I want to watch the next Star Wars movie, or I want to watch the next Avengers movie. And I think it's very easy for people to condescend to those people and be like, oh, that's your source of meaning in life. That's so, pathetic or whatever. But, I don't think that's fair. It's like, it's your survival instinct in some way, just looking for something to hold on to. You have to, Joel says to Ellie in The Last of Us that you have to keep finding something new to fight for. And yeah, I agree. I think that as long as you're here, you should try to frame things for yourself in a way that makes you want to keep going. I mean, that's the kind of central assumption, assuming that you want to be around. Like, there is the exit that I don't want to get into or talk about in this video, but you're not obliged to stay. But I will say, I have on a couple of occasions at my most depressed kind of contemplated leaving. But I felt like what does that achieve, right? What does that, the world moves on, people will forget you. And I mean, the world will move on and people will forget you at the end of your life anyway, eventually. Or like eventually you have the heat death of the universe and everything will be gone. But so, if you're maximally frustrated with your circumstances, you can always take pretty drastic action to change things. Like, you can, leave town, go to another country, right? You can, different people have different circumstances, and you may have dependents, or you may have things that just kind of seem futile. But I think, being able to imagine a way out can keep you going. Like, people have endured incredible hardship on this earth. Like, people have been, in like unjustly jailed for 20 years or more, right? Nelson Mandela was in prison for a long time. And it's just having something that you care about that's greater than yourself, that you want to participate in and you want to contribute to in some way. I think that is the source of not necessarily, joy or tremendous meaning, but it's something to keep going. You need to keep going in order to then get to do more things or get to experience new things. And you have to have imagination. I think, one of my riffs is that the imagination deficit is the most staggering thing in the human realm, but most people don't realize it because most people can't imagine what the lack of imagination is doing to us. That we just go about our day every day for months, years, decades, and not consider that if you don't like your life, you can change it. If changing is not easy, you can plan a change. So I don't know how difficult it will be for everyone else, but for me, when I started, so my first big change was when I got married, bought my house, got a job, moved out, right? All those things. And then my life felt like a jail sentence. Even though I loved my wife and I loved my job, I just felt like, oh my god, my mortgage takes 30 years to pay off. I've been working for like 3 or 4 years. Every day feels like drudgery. It's the same thing over and over again. And is this what my life is going to be like for the next 25 years? And while the idea of that was painful and depressing in some way, it's been 7-8 years since that, and I think I had a feeling that things would change in some way that I could not anticipate, and I found out that it was true about 5 years in. So I left my job at 5.5 years, and the past couple of years has been amazing for me. I mean, the pandemic has been annoying. Like it canceled my travel trips and stuff, but I did spend 5+ years while I was working. I would write in the evenings and at night, and I would tweet, right? And for many years nobody gave a shit about my Twitter or my blog or anything, but I did, right? Nobody else cared, but I cared, because I wanted to be a writer, because I loved books as a kid, and I committed myself to saying that even if I never achieve success or acclaim or any kind of recognition, right? As long as I'm doing what I love, that has to be enough for me. Like everything else on top is bonuses, right? Like I enjoy words. I like reading and writing. I would like to continually get better at reading and writing. And I believe that if you do anything with all your heart for 30 years, let's say, you will get really good at it. You will get like internationally good at it. And when you get that good, people can't ignore you. And then if you're moderately intelligent, it becomes relatively trivial to get not necessarily like grand recognition for it, but to get compensated for it. So you can, I believed that it was possible for me to leave my job, which I enjoyed and found meaningful as far as the options that I had in front of me were concerned. But I was looking for something even more than that at the time I perhaps did not deserve, but I wanted to earn it, right? And that gave me something to hold on to while everything else was collapsing, right? Like my writing habit. And yeah, so here I am. I'm living my best life as best as I can. I would say I'm happy, right? Are there things that I'm kind of unhappy about? I'm still sad and grieving that I didn't get to do the trip that I wanted to do. I didn't get to go to New York and meet dozens of friends, and I didn't get to go to Bombay or Bangalore. I have all these friends in cities around the world that I want to visit, but I can't right now. That makes me very sad. But I can still connect with them, right? I can still write to them, have them write back to me, right? Chat with them, do a video call, like whatever. Find a way. You have to believe that So a bunch of it is, I think people are trained to be helpless. It's called learned helplessness, and it's a challenge to unlearn that. And very often you need someone else. So with studies where they like it's kind of semi, the ethics of it is kind of bleak, but they did this thing where they do electric shocks on dogs, some at random and some at certain intervals. And when you shock a dog randomly, if I remember correctly, what happens is they just give up. They don't bother trying to avoid it anymore. And so you have to like physically drag them out of the cage or wherever it is that they're in that administers the shock, before they see for themselves that, hey, actually I don't need to be in this place where I'm getting shocks. Actually, getting electric shocks is not something that is a universal thing about reality, but about that narrow context that I'm in. And you have to, so sometimes you need somebody to drag you out of the space that you're in. And again, we have blinders on all the time. We experience a tiny fragment of what reality is, and then we assume that it's very natural to assume that the way your life has been so far, it's how things are going to be. If people have been mean to you, you assume that everyone's going to be mean to you. And that's not true. Like you don't know the world. The world is a very big place. That's true for good and bad as well. The world is better and worse than you think it is, even if you think you know it very well. Like that, people will always surprise you, and I guess you have to learn to enjoy being surprised. And enjoy is a little bit of a loaded word, right? But you have to roll with it, right? It's like surfing the waves, and you will fall and you have to get back up and surf again. You have to find a way to enjoy that. You have to find a way to laugh. I think a sense of humor is very important too, and which isn't necessarily about laughing at everything, and isn't necessarily and particularly it shouldn't be about condescending to people or laughing at other people's misfortune. Rather, it's laughter at the intrinsic absurdity of life itself, which manifests in a lot of different ways, right? And I think if you can't laugh, if you can't enjoy laughter, then you're gonna get anxious and neurotic, and that will lead to a kind of unhappiness. So you have to be able to laugh, you have to be able to find things that you're excited about, you have to be able to, and if you fail, you have to be okay with that. Like, you should be alright. Like, you know, and initially you probably won't be. I wasn't, right? Initially I was very frustrated and upset that I would fail, frustrated. There's this idea of effort shock, like when you find out how difficult things really are and how long it takes to get successful at anything, and just how much, you know, fairy tales should come with warning labels, because they make it seem, you know, in action movies or whatever, because they make it seem like you just, you know, there's this like there's a Cracked article that talks about it, right? Like, there's like some montage where the hero has very strong feelings and then works out really hard for what appears to be like a short period of time, and then they win the fight or whatever it is. And in reality, like, Olympians are training 99.999% of the time, and like the competition day is like 1 day in 1,000 or 2,000 days or something like that. And so you have to learn to enjoy the training. You can't just be forcing yourself into training that you find unpleasant because you're pinning all your hopes and dreams on winning a trophy that you might not get, right? You have to enjoy the work. You have to find work that you enjoy. And, you know, again, I can hear someone saying that, you know, that's a luxury some of us cannot afford. Sure. So if you have to do some shit work that you don't like because of your circumstances, you have dependents, you have bills to pay, then I would say carve out like 20 minutes to do what you love. You have to figure out what you love, whatever it is, you know. And it doesn't need to, the thing that you spend 20 minutes a day on, that is what you believe you love at age 20. It doesn't need to be what you're doing at 30 or 40, right? You just need to have that practice of carving out a little bit of time for yourself and doing what you think is beautiful, what you think is beloved. You know, it's just, I think 20 minutes a day is reasonable to ask of anyone, that anyone can ask of themselves, right? I'm not asking you to do it. Like, you know, if you want to do it, you can. I can't force you, and I don't want to force you, right? You know, if you're happy being miserable, then be miserable, right? Like, there's part of it is about the elimination of coercion, which I have a video about. And you don't want to be you can't coerce yourself into happiness. That's a very important point. Like, you can't force yourself to be happy. You can't bully yourself into being happy. You can't shame and embarrass yourself into being happy. Happiness is what happens when you remove all of those elements, and then you reduce the muscular tension in your body from having all these competing ideas and stress and back pain and whatnot, right? And yeah, I know if you have chronic illnesses, or if you have chronic, like, I do believe that people without chronic illnesses and ailments underestimate the degree to which those things, you know, drive people to the edge. I think, you know, like, I think people with allergies, like very bad allergies, they are actually kind of likelier to commit suicide than I think even the average person who's depressed. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like there's some stats about that, like just unbearable physical pain that doesn't seem to be going away, and you can't figure out a coping mechanism of some kind. Like, then it you know, that's unbearable in the most basic fundamental sense. So I don't have any advice for people with that. You know, I'm not gonna pretend to have all the answers, and I can't speak about things that I don't have experience with. But, you know, I think just psychological, and again, you know, maybe some things are like an allergy of the brain. Like, I have it, like, I've been depressed a couple of times, like very bad, like in my experience, very bad, like very debilitating. You know, I can't get myself to go to work. I mean, I go to work, but like I'm there but not there. I'm kind of living in, it felt like prison, right? It felt just like bleak and nothing to be excited about, nothing to look forward to, just surviving day by day. I did have that for several months, twice. It might happen again, you know, and the second time I went through it, the circumstances were worse than the first time. But because I got through the first time, the second time I did have at least the belief that I'm gonna get through it somehow eventually. And I did. And I'm pretty confident now that the next time I have some kind of depressive episode, which, you know, I wouldn't I wouldn't bet against me. It doesn't feel like it's gonna happen anytime soon, but like I wouldn't bet against me having it. Like I wouldn't bet that I'm not gonna have it, because life will surprise you. You have to let life surprise you, and you have to not. The more certainty you have about life, I find, like past a certain threshold, then it just gets depressing again. Because it just, what's the point of living life if you already know everything that's gonna happen, and you already know how things are going to play out, and there's no surprise, there's no joy. But life always finds a way to surprise you, because the world is so big and complex, and there's always crazy shit happening. And it might not be pleasant surprises, but it's new challenges, new contexts. And I would also say that a very critical thing is relationships with other people. I think if you're living kind of in your own head with yourself, that can make things very bleak. And I think we are social creatures, very fundamentally. I think it's possible even that we were social creatures before we learned to be individuals, like before we developed consciousness and whatnot. Humans were, a group animal, right? And so I think that healthy social relations is a very important part of happiness. And, there's a whole bunch of studies and stuff about this, but the way I think about it is just always make sure that you're periodically trying to help someone else out for free, like just for the sake of it. Just talk to someone who needs talking to. Ask people how they're doing, listen to people, be there for people, and ask them how they're doing, ask them if they need help with anything. It's just I watch my friend's video. Right. Having good relations with people is a natural kind of happiness driver. And, you may start out in conditions where you don't like the people around you. You might not have a great family, and you might not have great friends early on. But the world is a very big place, so you can always be seeking out new people. You can talk to a new person every day, or several new people every day online. And eventually, if you keep talking to people, you'll eventually find someone who gets you. And when you find people who get you, who bring out the best in you, see the best in you, like then you'll want to pass it on, right? So for me, like a lot of my motivation is that I enjoyed books and songs and stuff so much. They gave me this feeling, like a religious feeling. It's very this beautiful feeling of participating in something greater than myself, communion, right? Being with others, even with authors who are long dead, right? Like just feeling those feelings makes me want to give back. I have drunk from that well of human consciousness, and I want to give back. I want to inspire some other kid to do better. This is part of why I make these videos. And, it might not be for everyone. That's fine. The world is a big place. And, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about... If you're not happy, I wouldn't worry too much about trying to be happy, because that's kind of a losing game. Try to ask yourself what it would take to earn your self-respect. Right? Who do you respect and why? What do you respect about the people that you respect? Think about the people in your life. Think about public figures that you think you like, and don't get too invested, because public figures tend to have a habit of disappointing us eventually. So, but even so, people are complex. You don't need to idolize someone in their entirety to realize that there's something good about them. I recently learned that Marilyn Manson was an abusive partner to his partners, which is horrifying and unforgivable, right? Like, it's just terrible. And at the same time, there are a couple of there are a couple of things that he said that I appreciate. Like, when he wrote about the Columbine shootings, and people asked him what would he say to those kids, and he said something like, I wouldn't say anything to them. I would listen to them, which is what nobody did. He's right about that. And he's also an abusive piece of shit. Like, people are complex, and I don't have to pedestalize Manson to take away one good thing that he did or said and apply that in my own life and try to be a better person. I'm not here to judge people. I'm here to try and, we are each on a journey, right, in life. Each one of us is born, we die, we have that dash in between, which is the path that we walk. And along the way, we bump into other people. We learn about the journeys that people have taken long before us. We get the sense of people's journeys after us. We read about history, learn about cycles, grand narratives, the rise and fall of empires, nations, just all kinds of grand shit happening. Progress of technology and science and humanity. And then, what's your place in all of that, right? Like, you don't need to necessarily have a grand role in a grand scheme of things, but you can just be a force, a nourishing force, for good, right? You can just take care of yourself. If you do nothing else but to unlearn your own coercion and your own whatever self-hatred you might have, and whatever it is about you that you might have inherited, right, from other people, from your family or from broader culture. If you can unlearn that stuff and you can be a good person to other people by your definition, whatever you think is respectful and admirable in a person, you can earn your own respect, you can earn your own admiration, you can conduct yourself with what you think is decency and goodness, and then you do that, you prioritize that, and you keep at it. And there is this, you will lose the kind of like slowly the self-doubt, like the negative kind of hateful self-doubt will start to wither away, and your disdain for existence potentially will wither away. And I read the news. I know that there's terrible shit happening all the time. In my Google Keep, I have photos of victims of horrible things to remind myself that there's terrible stuff happening in the world, and that I want to contribute to the efforts that make the world a safer and kinder place for those people, kids, who've been through horrible shit. But like, I also have, like, you have to be kind of strategic about it, because you're not going to save the world overnight or in your lifetime. Like, it's a team effort, and it's a infinite game, right? So you have to pace yourself. You have to, there's this thing that I get DMs from kids and stuff all the time, and I often find there's this strain of over dramatic thinking and like kind of a catastrophic thinking, which is very like the world is terrible and going to hell, and I can't do anything about it, therefore I'm miserable. Like, okay, that might be true, but like, what power do you have as an individual, right? And what are you doing with that power? Like, are you doing what you can to make the space that you are in and around you, but like your own inner space and your own inner, your thoughts, your mind, right, your beliefs, and the interactions that you have with the people around you and the people around you, like, are you choosing the best people that you can that you can relate to? Are you, because if you're going to have that extreme kind of thinking, which is that the world is going to hell and I can't do anything, therefore I'm not going to do anything, I'm helpless, like that, I have to be gentle about this, but that there's a kind of narcissism in that, there's a kind of selfishness in that, which is that, if things don't go perfectly your way, you're gonna just give up. Like it's okay to grieve, it's okay to be upset and stuff, but once you face reality, the cool thing about facing reality and being shocked by it is eventually the shock wears off, and then you are left with reality, which you can confront and you can do something about. You can change your decisions, you can do something differently, you can act differently, right? You can make plans, you can follow up on them, you can coordinate, you can build relationships with other people, right? You might not be able to change the outcome of a national election, right? But what about a local election if you care about politics, right? If you don't care about politics, what about just building a community of people who care about what you care about, and treating them with kindness so that they have a space that they turn to soothe themselves, right? To let go of their anger and hatred and whatever, so that they can be nourishing presences in their own life. There's this quote from someone I mentioned in a different video as well. What does the world need most of all? And the world needs people who have come alive, right? Because so you have to come alive. And when you are alive and you are a fluid expression of whatever it is that you believe and whatever it is that you love, then you won't even bother asking questions like, am I happy? Like, I am me, I am the way I am, and there's no worry or anxiety. I mean, you will have like small worries and small anxieties about like day-to-day life, like, there's this piece of work that I'm shipping, and the writing on it is not that great, and I made a mistake here, or I promised someone something and I can't get it to them on time. Like those little worries, it's, yeah, you will feel some worry and whatever, but it doesn't get into like the depths of your being, right? In the depths of your soul, there can be an invincible light, an invincible summer, right? A kind of clarity, right? A sense of what your purpose is, what your priorities are, deep belly laughter, right? And an excitement for something, a childlike joy, and yet an adult's kind of measured ability to process what's going on. If you don't feel like that's you right now, that's fine. I wasn't like that. It took me many years to get to something that is a resemblance of that. And, maybe 10 years from now, I'll look back at this guy making this video and be like, what the fuck is that guy saying? He's a child. He doesn't know anything. Maybe. I don't know. I'll see. But, I feel pretty good about where I am in my life right now. I think in the past few years, I have become much more of a nourishing presence for myself and for the people around me. And yeah, I make these videos to share that with people who are interested. Thanks for the question, and ask me more questions if you would like. And thanks for hanging out. Done.